U.S. announces sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies. The United States announced on Wednesday the imposition of sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, stating that it is prepared to go even further to stop the war in Ukraine. Given President Putin's refusal to end this senseless war, the Treasury is sanctioning the two largest Russian oil companies that finance the Kremlin's war machine, said U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in a statement. "We encourage our allies to join us and adopt these sanctions," he added. Bessent also said that the U.S. is ready to take further action and once again urged Moscow to agree immediately to a ceasefire in Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump also commented, saying it was about time to impose sanctions on Russia, but expressed hope that the situation would not last long. "These are huge sanctions. We hope they won't last long. We hope the war will end," Trump said while meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in the Oval Office. Trump cancels planned summit with Putin. Trump announced that he had canceled a planned summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying it did not seem right to hold such a meeting. "We canceled the meeting with President Putin. It just didn't seem right," Trump told reporters. "I didn't think we would get to where we needed to go, so I canceled it, but we'll hold it in the future." Trump expressed frustration over stalled negotiations. "Honestly, every time I talk to Vladimir, we have good conversations, but they go nowhere. They simply go nowhere," he repeated. These statements came a day after the White House said there were no plans for a Trump-Putin meeting in the near future. Earlier that morning, Treasury Secretary Bessent had announced a significant strengthening of sanctions against Russia, and later told Fox Business that Putin had not been frank or honest at the negotiating table, which left President Trump disappointed. European Union adopts 19th sanctions package against Russia. After overcoming a veto from Slovakia, the European Union approved its 19th package of sanctions against Russia. The announcement was made by Kaja Kallas, the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. "We have just adopted our 19th package of sanctions, targeting Russian banks, cryptocurrency exchanges, and entities in India and China, among others," Kallas posted on X. The EU is restricting Russian diplomats' movements to counter destabilization attempts. The adoption of this package became possible after Slovakia lifted its veto on energy imports. "It is becoming increasingly difficult for Putin to finance this war," Kallas emphasized. The new package includes a total ban on Russian liquefied natural gas, LNG imports, starting January 1, 2027, tighter financial restrictions to prevent transactions with Russian banks and institutions in third countries, and measures against Russia's payment systems. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated that, with approval from all 27 member states, the EU continues to exert strong pressure on the aggressor. "For the first time, we are targeting Russia's gas sector, the heart of its war economy. We will not yield until the Ukrainian people achieve a just and lasting peace," she wrote. European Parliament President Roberta Metsola also praised the move. The adoption of the EU's 19th sanctions package is another crucial step away from Russian fossil fuels. "We must ensure that sanctions have maximum impact and that all loopholes are closed, not just to support Ukraine, but for our collective security." The package also targets Russia's shadow fleet, now over 118 sanctioned ships, and limits exports of sensitive technologies such as AI, geospatial data, and critical metal components. Companies in China, India, and other nations supporting Russia's military industry were also sanctioned. U.S. sanctions on Russian oil giants. Before the EU's announcement, the U.S. administration revealed new sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, as well as dozens of their subsidiaries. Washington justified the move by citing Putin's refusal to stop this senseless war in Ukraine. "Now is the time to stop the bloodshed and establish an immediate ceasefire," said Treasury Secretary Bessent. Shortly after, Trump said he hoped the sanctions would be short-lived, since he wants the war to end soon. "These are enormous sanctions, and we hope they don't last too long. We hope the war ends," the U.S. president said while meeting NATO's Mark Rutte in the Oval Office. "Whenever I talk to Vladimir, we have good conversations, but they lead nowhere," Trump added. Zelensky calls sanctions a strong message. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky praised the sanctions announced by the U.S. and the EU, calling them very important. "We were expecting this. Let's hope it works. It's very important," he said upon arriving in Brussels for a European summit. Zelensky added that achieving a ceasefire is possible, but requires more pressure on Moscow. He thanked President Trump on X. "This is a strong and necessary message that aggression will not go unanswered." Russia, however, called the U.S. sanctions extremely counterproductive, saying they do not help bring peace to Ukraine. The Russian Foreign Ministry stated that Moscow's objectives remain unchanged and that the causes of the conflict must be addressed. Regarding the EU's measures, the Kremlin argued that the sanctions would primarily hurt EU member states, which refused to admit that earlier sanctions have failed. France warns of growing military threats. Meanwhile, the Chief of Staff of the French Armed Forces, General Fabien Mandon, said France's army must be ready for a confrontation within 3 to 4 years with Russia, warning that Moscow may be tempted to continue the war on our continent. The first goal I have set for the armed forces is to be ready for a conflict within 3 to 4 years, Mandon told lawmakers, stressing the need for a rearmament effort. General Pierre Schill, another senior French military official, warned that the world is increasingly unstable and that Europe must be prepared to defend itself. We are in a world where the use of force once again seems normal for some great powers, Schill said. It's the return of empires. Against an empire, you are either a vassal or an enemy. Europe must take its destiny into its own hands.